Nobody wants to hear about scrap steam engines. Except him. But most people don't want to hear about that, especially us in the preservation community. It's always a sad topic, but there are many occasions of steam locomotives not just being scrapped. I mean, that's a dime a dozen. Most of them were. But there were also locomotives that had a chance to survive, had a chance to live on and be preserved, and for one reason or another, this just didn't happen. Now, I have done lists like this before, so get ready for a little bit of waterworks, a little bit of sorrow, a little bit of crippling depression, as we talk about 5 steam locomotives that almost survived, but didn't. Southern Pacific 1294. This engine was an 060, a little baby switcher unit that worked for Southern Pacific for many years, until eventually she didn't anymore. But she wasn't sent for scrapping initially. She wound up in the San Francisco Zoo? What? That's, not a place you'd think to find a preserved steam locomotive. But yes, in 1957 she wound up there, and the zoo wanted to use her in their playground area. She wound up being, actually, a very popular attraction because they just let the kids go ham. They could literally climb all over her. Look, everywhere. The children just climbing on the engine. Now, I concede this probably would be pretty fun, although I think it violates modern safety standards, but, 1957, whatever. But as you might imagine, this did take a toll, and it wasn't just the fact that she constantly had children climbing on her. It was also the fact that it was San Francisco, and that area has air with salt water in it, because it's by the ocean. And she was outside, with no cover. You see where this is going. She deteriorated a lot faster than most park engines would, and as a result, she eventually became a blatant safety hazard. If she wasn't technically already, she just became rife with tetanus. Tetanus. And the zoo did not decide to donate her to anywhere else. In 1987, she was removed from their park and unceremoniously scrapped. Which is a shame, because she was a cute little engine and probably made many children happy over the years. I suppose in that way, one could argue that at least her final days were spent bringing joy, rather than being just straight up abandoned and rusting away in obscurity. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, number 510. This was another very small steam locomotive. Another 060, actually. And after being disposed of by CB&Q, she wound up being part of the French Lick Sheraton Hotel? Seriously, in French Lick, Indiana. What? Why was she what? I swear, some of these engines wind up in the weirdest places. But yeah, that's where she was for at least a few years, but, based on sources, sometime between 1965 and 1975, so sometime within a decade, great, that's very, very specific, she was scrapped. And there's not a lot of information as to the reasons for that decision. Perhaps the hotel simply didn't need her anymore. Perhaps they didn't realize the upkeep she would require. Perhaps they were simply remodeling. There could be a lot of reasons, but no matter what the case may be, they didn't donate her to a museum. They didn't try to sell her off. They just scrapped her, which is unfortunate. Again, it's just sad. And I wish I had more to tell you as to why, because maybe there was a viable reason for doing so. That does happen. Maybe she was in that bad a shape, but given she was part of a hotel, I can't imagine she'd be that bad off. In 1965 and 1975, even in the late end, she wouldn't have been sitting around that long. But like I said, no one seems to know exactly why. New York, Chicago, and St. Louis, number 965. There's a larger engine, a 282, and after being retired by NKP, she was acquired by one Richard Jensen. No! Jensen! What did you do? Why are we talking about you again? I don't know how I feel about this. I'm getting uncomfortable, because I know how this goes. Jensen may have started with his heart in the right place, but a lot of engines that fell into his care seem to wind up getting unceremoniously destroyed. And, yeah, so Jensen owned her, and did plan to restore her to operational condition, just like with his other engines, but that didn't happen. Due to various issues, it was decided eventually that she'd just be scrapped. Yup. Thanks, Dick. Really appreciate you. You are so... I'm sorry, what's the opposite of helpful? Shay, number 6. Serial number 1907. This engine was, well, a Shay, and has quite an interesting story behind her. She originally belonged to Mower Lumber and Western Maryland, but wound up being used by a coal processor near Tunnelton, West Virginia, and then was bought by David Corbett in 1974. He had relocated her to a point adjacent to a chassis line in preparation to move her to a different location. But while she was just hanging out, vibing, not bothering anybody, a coal train derailed and hit her and did irreparable damage. That's just, wow, great. That is most unfortunate. In 1978, the remains of her was simply sold to Cass, since she did still have some good parts in her. Those parts were used to repair the other Shays on Cass's roster, and in 1980, Cass wound up scrapping her remains. I can't say I blame them in this case, because this just seems to be bad luck more than anything malicious. She was just sitting there, and a train derailed and hit her. It wasn't like anyone wanted to scrap her. Heck, Corbett was trying to save her. It's just a real shame. Zero. What? Zero? Like number 0? No. Her name was Zero. She had a name. She was a tiny little 040 tank engine, and she actually came from an amusement park in South Carolina called Pirate Land Park. She was a Cook-Alco built engine, originally constructed in 1916. Just a little baby, and probably kind of cute, though I admit I am having serious trouble finding a picture of this engine. I chose to put her on the list despite this problem because I find her situation unique and very, very sad, because she wound up at a museum. She was at the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, and you'd think being there, she'd be alright. Maybe not restored to operation or anything, but certainly available for display, as she was a cute baby engine, and kids and adults alike love little engines. They're adorable. But no, Zero was scrapped by the museum. She was cut up by Siskin Steel in 1980 on the museum's grounds. What? Why? Why would you do that? You're a museum. That is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. Well, I can't really figure out exactly why this was done, but I can only imagine that Zero may have been in such bad shape that they didn't really see a reason to keep her. Maybe they just needed the extra money at the time. I understand operating a museum can be expensive, but to scrap a preserved engine for that? I mean, I don't know, guys. That bothers me. I don't like that. No, don't like that. Like, I know I mentioned that Cass did it just a moment ago, but at least in their case, that engine was so destroyed that keeping her around just didn't make any sense, and they still used her for spare parts anyway. Zero was just thrown away. And I just... Nope, don't like that. That's where I'm at with it. And with that, a special thank you goes out to all my underwater train finders, Some Dude 267, Orange Glass, Benjamin Owens, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, Brian, Jack Carson's Road Videos, Lord Off 444, Murder Drone Stall, A Person 723, Ro Hudson 2860, Isofer 1405, Charles Kwiatkowski, Matt Weaver, Tom Red Lion, NS Productions 8104, Hendrick Motorsports Fan 5, Wheeljack 8401, Rescues Greyhounds The Baxter, Caleb Crosswhite, Ohio Trucker 1, Andrew Bowen, Josh Johnson, Hayden DeGrow, Caleb Rainwaters, Prez Trenton, Master of None, The Oklahoma Hot Rail, Liam Wright, Mr. Sleepy, Travis Delinsky, Jared Brussell, Joshua Long, Hannah Bird, Amtrak 2024 Productions, Tommy Rossini, That Guy with a Beard, Ben McCullough, Panzer Kitsune 131-232, Mark Holding, Dr. Racer 78, G Wiz, and Mr. Terevel. Terevel. Yes. Yes. I will get this eventually. Also, by the way, Jared Brussell, I keep saying Brussell, apparently it's Jared Russell. This whole time, he never said anything until very recently. It's not my fault. That's not my fault. You could have said something way sooner, my man. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fun farewell.